If you've ever felt someone twisting your words or steering you into a lose-lose situation, this is how you flip it. I'm breaking down 8 tactics to spot manipulators fast and the exact counter moves that shut them down without blowing up the relationship. Hi, I'm Jen, and I have over 20 years experience helping leaders and individual contributors to develop themselves and grow the skills they need for their careers. So if this is the type of advice you're looking for, click on the like button to let me know. Have you ever walked away from a conversation and thought, wait, how did I just apologize for something they did? That is one of the classic signs you may have been dealing with a manipulator. One minute you're trying to have a normal conversation, and the next minute you're defending your intentions, questioning your memory, and somehow feeling guilty about everything. And the worst part, manipulators are not always obvious. In fact, sometimes they can be very charming and funny and calm. And really skilled manipulators can make it look like they're the reasonable one while you're being unreasonable or unfair. And so that's why today we're going to talk about 8 genius ways to outsmart the manipulators using lessons inspired by Machiavelli's strategy. Now, let's get this straight. We are not trying to be the villain here. We're not going to be cold, cruel, or manipulative ourselves. What we're trying to do is stop ourselves from being easy to control. Because there's a big difference between being kind and easy to exploit. Machiavelli understood something uncomfortable about human nature. People do not always move through life with pure intentions. Some people will use charm, guilt, fear, confusion, and pressure just to get what they want. So the solution is not to become paranoid, but to be observant. Be calm and strategic, and don't be the person that easily falls into their ploys. So let's get into these strategies. The first way to outsmart them is to spot the game early on. Most manipulators win because you don't realize they've started this game and you're already emotionally tangled in it. They can create confusion, shift blame, change the subject, and they make you feel like the problem is not what they did, but how you reacted to what they did. For example, you may say, "Hey, it bothered me when you made a joke about me in front of everyone." And their response may be, "Wow, I guess I just can't say anything around you anymore." You see what happened there? You brought up a specific behavior and they turned it into an accusation against you. So instead of discussing the joke that offended you, you're now having to defend yourself against being too sensitive or too controlling or too difficult or not having a sense of humor. And that's the game they're playing. The moment you can spot it, then you regain the power. Machiavelli would say that power often belongs to the person who sees reality clearly before everyone else does. So your first job is not to react, it's to recognize. Ask yourself, what's happening here? Are they changing the subject? Are they making me feel guilty for having a boundary? Are they creating a sense of urgency so that I don't have time to think about this? This doesn't mean that every awkward conversation you have with someone is manipulation. Sometimes people are just clumsy communicators. Sometimes people get defensive because they are human. But when you notice the same pattern again and again, pay attention, because manipulation is not usually a single moment. Usually it is a pattern that you can identify. The goal is to name the tactic without overreacting to it externally. So when they do something, you could calmly think, they're deflecting, Or, oh, they're trying to guilt trip me. Or, look at that. They're trying to rush me into a decision. Or they're trying to make me feel responsible for their emotions and their behavior. Once you name the move, you're less likely to be controlled by it, because confusion is where manipulators thrive, and clarity is where they start losing. The second genius technique is to control your emotional volume. Manipulators love emotional reactions because emotional reactions give them material to work with. So if you get angry, they say, see, this is why I can't talk to you. If you cry, they may use your vulnerability against you. And if you panic, they could pressure you into agreeing quickly to something. So the conversation becomes less about what they did and more about how you responded. And this is why being calm is leverage in the conversation, not weakness. But let's be realistic. Staying calm around manipulative people is not always easy. Sometimes they know exactly which emotional buttons to press because, unfortunately, some of them installed those buttons. Family members, exes, coworkers, toxic friends, they may know your insecurities, fears, your guilt triggers, and your need to be seen as a good person. So, controlling your emotional volume does not mean you feel nothing. It just means you stop handing them the remote control so that they can just ratchet it up whenever they feel like it. You can feel angry and still speak slowly and intentionally. For those that study emotional intelligence, this is called being angry with purpose. And you absolutely can use this. You could also feel hurt and still avoid begging them for basic respect. You can feel pressured and still say, I need time to think about this. We're going to circle back to this. One useful phrase you could use is, I'm not going to respond while this conversation is heated. Another is, I hear you, but I'm not making a decision right now. Or, we can talk about this when we're both calm. These sentences are powerful because they refuse to reward chaos. Manipulators often escalate because escalation works. They raise their voice, they create drama, they threaten consequences, or make you feel like everything must be solved immediately. But when you remain steady, you interrupt that pattern and you become harder for them to control. Think of it like this. If someone is trying to pull you into a tug of war, the most strategic move is to not always pull harder. Sometimes the best move is to drop the rope. That does not mean you lose. It means they no longer get to decide the game. The third genius way to outsmart manipulators is to ask better questions. Did this one surprise you? Manipulators often rely on vague pressure. They'll say things like, after everything I've done for you, well, you know what I mean. You're really not going to do this for me? I thought you cared. These statements can trigger us because they're emotionally loaded and they're logically slippery. They make you feel accused, but they don't give you anything solid to respond to. So instead of defending yourself immediately, ask questions, not aggressive questions, not sarcastic, but calm, specific, clarifying questions. Things like, what exactly are you asking me to do? What do you mean by that? Can you give me a specific example? What part of my statement feels unfair to you? What would a fair solution look like? This is a very Machiavellian move in the best sense because you're not attacking their emotions. You're forcing the conversation out of that emotional realm and into more fact-based discussions. Manipulation hates specifics because specifics reveal whether the request is reasonable or it's ridiculous. If someone says, "You never supported me," it's so easy for us to want to respond, "That's not true. I always support you." But instead of going through that, consider asking the question, what support are you asking for right now? What support are you looking for from me? That question changes everything, and now they have to clarify. Maybe they have a real need, or maybe they're just trying to make you feel guilty. Either way, you'll get the information and you'll know. Another example is you may hear them say, "If you loved me, you would help me." You can respond to that with, "What does love have to do with this request?" Now, that might sound a little bold, so use your own wording, but the principle is the same. You want to separate the emotional hook from the actual thing that they're asking you to do. Manipulators want you reacting to the hook, and you want to be specific and focus on the ask. What are they wanting? The fourth genius way is to use strategic silence. This sounds so simple, but it is incredibly powerful. Most people are uncomfortable with silence, and manipulators know this. They'll make a bold accusation and then wait for you to scramble. They'll want you to feel the pressure of the silence between you, and then you start to feel that urgency, that panic, and you're going to try to fill the space. They may make an unreasonable request or a bold accusation or just something hurtful, and then leave the silence there for you to try to fill it. In that instance, you don't have to respond immediately. You can pause, you can take a deep breath, and you can let their words sit there. This is especially useful if someone says something designed to provoke you, like, "Wow, I guess you only care about yourself." Instead of immediately responding with, "No, I don't. I care so much. I care all the time." Pause, look at them calmly, and then say, "I'm not accepting that framing." Or, "That's not a fair summary of what I've said." Or maybe even, "I'm going to take a moment before I respond to that." Silence creates space between the stimulus and the response. And in that space, you get your power back. And they're not forcing you into an uncomfortable or rushed decision. And who knows? If you don't immediately respond with trying to comfort, defend, or explain, they may keep talking and actually reveal what their true motivation is. Now keep in mind, strategic silence doesn't mean giving people the silent treatment. The silent treatment is punishment. Strategic silence is about self-control. You're not trying to hurt them. You just want to give yourself enough space to think. And then you can respond in a way that is productive for you. Our fifth genius way is to watch actions, not speeches. Manipulators are excellent speakers. They may apologize beautifully. They may promise change poetically. They may explain their intentions so convincingly that you start to feel guilty for noticing the pattern. But here's the rule. Charm is not character. Words matter, yes, but patterns and behavior matter more. Machiavelli paid close attention to appearances versus reality. People often manage appearances because appearances create influence. A manipulator may work very hard to appear kind, generous, misunderstood, loyal, or victimized. But your job is not to be hypnotized by the performance. Your job is to look at the repeated behavior. Do they respect when you say no? Do they change after apologizing? Do they take responsibility without making you comfort them? Do they tell the truth when lying would benefit them? Do they treat people well when they have nothing to gain? Do they behave differently in public versus in private. And that last one is important. Some manipulators are saints in public and the exact opposite in private. In public, they're charming, helpful, delightful, and in private, they criticize, pressure, guilt trip, and control. And everyone else sees that sweet, kind, wonderful version, and it's easy for us to think, am I the problem? But in this instance, you're just seeing the version that no one else gets to see. So watch the actions, not once, but repeatedly. A single bad day is just being human. A repeated pattern is information that you need to be aware of. And a sincere apology includes them attempting to change. If you don't see that pattern change or the behavior change, then it could be that that apology was not sincere. So the sixth genius way is to set boring boundaries. Now notice I said boring, not dramatic boundaries, not emotional boundaries, just boring, clear, repeatable boundaries. Why? Because manipulators want to debate your boundaries. If you say, I'm not available tonight, then they want to know why. And then you explain why, and then they argue with you. And then you end up in a loop where you're explaining more, they are pushing more, they are questioning more, and you end up defending yourself and feeling guilty. And it's exhausting. So eventually, you may give in to the manipulator just to keep this loop from repeating. And that's why boundaries need to be boring. So let's say they want to go out. I'm not available tonight. And then they want to push. You may say something like, I'm not comfortable with that. I need 24 hours before I decide. I'll leave the conversation if you keep insulting me. Short, clear, calm. The manipulator may push for more, but you could answer with, that doesn't work for me. I've already answered. I understand you see it that way. My answer is still no. So you may have a conversation with a manipulator and they keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and you keep trying to set a boundary and they keep saying why over and over and over like a toddler. And you feel like a broken record because you keep repeating that you cannot do this. And that's exactly what this technique is, the broken record technique. You repeat the boundary, and it doesn't have to be word for word exactly what you said the last time. It can be different ways to phrase it, but you have to be firm and keep letting them know that regardless of how hard they push, whatever angle they come at, this boundary is not going to move and it's not going to be broken. Think of it as a locked door. You lock the door and it really doesn't matter how hard they knock, it's not going to be opened. And just keep in mind, boundaries are not about controlling the other person. They're about making clear what you will and won't do. So, if someone is yelling, telling them you need to stop yelling isn't as effective as saying, if your yelling continues, I'll just end the conversation here. All right. Our seventh genius way is to stop explaining yourself so much. And this one is hard for kind people because kind people often believe that if they can just explain it clearly enough, the manipulator's finally going to understand and they're going to realize that this is coming from a good place and a loving heart. And so they explain, and they explain the explanation, and then they clarify the explanation of the explanation. But the problem is with manipulative people, this over-explaining actually backfires. And why is that? Because they're not seeking understanding. They're looking for openings. And every piece of information gives them another item that they could twist or challenge or misunderstand or use against you. So You might say, I can't come because I'm tired and I have a lot of work and I haven't had much sleep and I'm trying to take better care of myself. And they say, well, everyone is tired. Or they may say, oh, so work matters more than me? Or, you know what, you told me you were sleeping fine last weekend. And so now you're arguing things that don't really matter when the boundary that you were trying to set is that you could not come. So keep it short. I'm not going to be able to come tonight. And that's it. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't need a permission slip to say no. The Machiavellian strategy often involves controlling information, not lying or deceiving, just not handing over unnecessary information to someone who has shown that they will misuse it. So if you have someone who constantly twists your words, don't give them as many words to twist. If someone constantly weaponizes your vulnerability, reduce the amount of vulnerable information you give them. It's not being cold. It is not being mean. It is being wise and taking care of yourself. And use simple phrases like, I'm not available. This doesn't work for me. I'm not going to get into all the details. I've made my decision. I understand you're disappointed. I'm not changing my answer. Notice how none of these are rude. They're just complete. Manipulators often train you to believe that a short answer is mean, and it is not. A short answer is sometimes the healthiest answer, especially when the other person has proven that the more words you give them, the more they're going to use it against you. All right, I have one more tip for you. But before we get into it, if you're finding this information interesting, helpful, useful in any way, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video with someone that you think could use the information as well. All right, number 8. The 8th genius way is to build quiet independence. And this is a deep one. Manipulators have the most power when they control something that you believe you cannot live without. It could be approval, money, access information, social belonging, emotional validation, your reputation, a relationship, a sense of identity, any of these and so many more. But one of the smartest ways to outsmart the manipulators is to quietly reduce their leverage. Not loudly, not dramatically, not with a big announcement, but with quiet independence. And it looks like this. You could build other friendships. If you are dependent on them for money, then you save money for yourself whenever possible. Learn new skills. Get into new hobbies. Explore other sides of yourself. Stop telling them every private detail. You're going to do this without them. They don't need to be a part of it. And when you reach out to other people, you're going to get outside perspectives. You're going to learn more about other people and how they react to situations. And that can help you to recognize even more patterns with the person who is being manipulative. Bottom line, you're creating more options for yourself. And the more options you have, the harder it is to control you. Manipulators often want you to feel isolated and alone and dependent on them. But when you build an independence, you break that. Your goal is to become so grounded and clear and self-respecting that their usual tactics stop working on you. You don't have to be cruel or cold, and you don't have to become suspicious of everyone. You just need to set those boundaries in place so that you break any potential manipulative hold that they have on you. They want speed, emotion, confusion, access, and your response should be slowness, calmness, clarity, and boundaries. If they want your kindness, They need to deserve it. If they want your loyalty, they need to show evidence that it's something you should give them. If you forgive them, their behaviors should change. So as you move forward, remember this. You don't outsmart a manipulator by becoming louder. You outsmart them by becoming clearer. You don't have to prove your worth. You're already worthy. You are going to beat the manipulation by no longer negotiating your worth with someone committed to misunderstanding it. They are willfully, intentionally misunderstanding it. And so you need to tell yourself you don't need their permission anymore. So keep in mind, small moves create big changes. And the more you practice, the more you'll realize something powerful. Manipulators are not unbeatable. They are just used to people reacting automatically. And once you stop reacting on instinct, the whole dynamic changes. So you can protect your peace by noticing and trusting the patterns, staying kind, but also staying sharp. And also remember that being friendly doesn't mean that you have to be easy to fool or someone's doormat. You can definitely stand up for yourself and have boundaries and still be that kind, loving person that you are. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that the information helped. And if you'd like more information on this subject or others, let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.